Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and then potentially could read next week based on my mood. I finished some books, and I want to tell you about them. I know, it's shocking. Here's a book that I've been talking about for a long time. I think I started this in maybe March. This is Paris Stories by Mavis Gallant. And this is a New York Review of Books edition. I've spoken before that short stories are difficult for me, and I've been trying to figure out why. I know that there are threads of short story. There's a genre or type of short story that that takes a normal experience and then subverts it and becomes surreal. Don't like those. There's some short stories where there's you kind of going along in the story, you're becoming invested, and then there's an abrupt ending with some wacko twist or strange punch that happens at the end. Not a fan of those either. The only short story collection previous to this year that I had really liked was, I think it was Jubal Lahiri did a short story collection, and the stories were lush. The writing was evocative, like I felt place, and I think that place piece is really important, because without it, I feel kind of unmoored and I'm not connected. And if I'm not connecting to a story, I just don't care. So a lot of times to create a sense of place, you need a on-ramp. You need a long ramp to create those sentiments, to build the place, to build the familiarity that someone would have, do that exposition. And so I get why it's not often in short stories, but I also think that's one of the things that I need. I've also come to realize that I look to literature for beauty, insights, connection. I want to learn something. I want a point of view that I hadn't originally considered or thought of. And a lot of times short stories don't provide that, or maybe an insight. And it's been through this year in the Shirley Hazzard project that I've been doing, where we read so many of her short stories together, that I'm starting to understand the genre, I guess it's not a genre, the format a little bit better. And someone, I think it may have been Susan, who also recommended this to me, said it's akin to listening to a train, overhearing a snippet of conversation while you're on a train. Like, you're only there for that journey, you're overhearing what's happening, but you don't have the full context. So I've been bringing that. That was really illuminating. It really helped me as I've been approaching short stories in general. And I know that Mavis Gallant is kind of a giant in this field, someone who's known as a stylist, someone who's known as kind of at the apex of her craft. So I know these are valuable. I know these are important. These did not connect with me. These didn't connect with me. I barely remember one of them. And yet I could tell as I was reading that craft was there. The craft was absolutely there. And so I really struggled, but when you hear that somebody is the apex and someone is really well known for this is their thing, you want to give it a little bit more space. You want, or at least I do, I like, okay, well, what makes this so great? So I know I'm coming at this with a deficit. But after I finished reading these stories, I decided to go and look for some reviews of this edition. And there were a couple things that stood out to me, and I'll include this review as a link below. This is from the Cincinnati Review, and it says, "What makes Gallant's writing so odd is less about content than structure. She's a virtuoso of exposition and summary who doesn't seem to have any particular regard for scene, that workhorse of most literary realism. It's not that she can't write them. There are scenes throughout Paris stories that are sharp and unforgettable, but Gallant seems to care less about the usual beats of fiction than about sketching the contours of a life, or more precisely, a particular consciousness and sensibility shown at a slant. I mean, if that doesn't like nail it, I don't know what does. Then there's a couple other things that I thought were interesting. They are almost always told in close third person, and where Gallant's own sensibility comes through is in that slant, the sharp but subtle angle of vision from which she views her subject. Her eye is keen, ironic, and sometimes vindictive. And when I read that, I thought, oh, that's one of the things that I was picking up on. And I was calling it this sophisticated veneer or smooth, like a remove that allowed for almost a judgment and it wouldn't be snide, but there was definitely something going on that I couldn't really put my finger on. But I never got the sense that the author liked these people, cared about these characters. You know, they were sketches. They were moments in time. And then here's the last sentence I wanted to share. Satire is too strong a word for what Gallant is up to here. Satire in the sense of big targets, didactism, broad swipes. The exposure of her characters feels less public than private. What Gallant is poking fun at is nothing less personal than their unspoken patterns of thought. This necessitates a sort of intimacy that is impossible without a degree of affection, and that is this strange mixture, biting wit tempered with a sense of warm familiarity that makes Gallant gallant. I mean, fair enough, but I didn't really feel the warmth, to be perfectly frank. And that's what I was missing. And also not enough Paris. like literally not enough Paris. She wrote these from Paris, but not all of them are set in Paris. There's some in other parts of Europe. I think I'm going to keep this because I think I might want to return to it as I start to understand more about short stories and read more of them, which is something that I'm going to be continuing on. It's a great opportunity to say that I'll put a link below, but I'm going to be doing another author spotlight series. This time it's going to be on Helen DeWitt. So I have some of her books here, and so we'll be doing a short series where we check in every week on progress against Helen DeWitt's books. The reason I'm interested in her is I've heard like the most amazing things about The Last Samurai, and I read the short story that she did, The English Understand Wool, and that short story blew me away. So she does have a short story collection in here that we'll be reading together on a weekly basis for a number of months. So if you are so inclined, I'll put a link with all of the information below and a link to the video where I talked about that as well, should you want to join. We'll be starting that in August. So yeah, I've learned something that is incredibly valuable, and I really appreciate, Susan, I hope you're not disappointed. I really appreciate the recommendation. You have exceptional taste, and I feel like I know a little bit more about what I'm looking for in short stories because of having read that. So thank you. Okay, so next up, I listened to a charming book. This is brand new, just out, and I grabbed it the moment that I saw it. This is Diary of a Tuscan Bookshop, a memoir, and it was written by Alba Donati, translated by Elena Pala, and narrated by Jane McDowell. This book had shades of Diary of a Bookseller by Shaun Bythell, who is a bookseller in Scotland. Very charming, very funny, but his sensibility is a little more wry and a little a little snide, dark, a little darker. Hers is much more uplifting, but with real interesting threads running through. So I was expecting super light, like the powdered sugary light kind of book, and I got something a little bit more interesting. Alba is a former publicist, a literary publicist with a lot of connections, but obviously getting a little burnt out on her career and her job. And she decides that she wants to open a bookstore in this very small village, only around 200 people year round in Tuscany. And she did this crowdsourcing, kind of crowdfunding to get it up and running. And everything is going well. She's moved back to this small town where she knows people, and her 100-year-old mother lives there as well. Just as an aside, for all the people who read Shirley Hazzard with me, the mother gives Dottie from Transit of Venus a run for her money. This mother is incredibly self-centered, incredibly narcissistic, and filled with rage at 100. So she moves back, she opens this bookstore, and everything is going very, very well. And then there's a fire. There's a fire that, while it doesn't decimate everything, it definitely impacts her ability to do business. There's a definite impact on the structure as well as some of the stock. And she's really blown away by the way that the community stands up and offers to help, and the way that they've all come together for the success of this bookstore. And that creates this wonderful vibe as you read this about community and the importance of community. What's also interesting is, as we continue to read and we talk about her rebuilding, then we start to look at the timeline and we realize, oh no, they're about to get hit by COVID. And so she ends up documenting what happens in this village in COVID, during COVID times, when they had to go all the different zones and the different categories of isolation that they would need to go in because of COVID and the protocols that they would need to do, and how this impacted the small community, and how it impacted her ability to do her job with her brand new business. It's both tender and thoughtful, but also very interesting. One of the things I loved most is that at the end of she writes it like a diary, and at the end of each day, she talks about the orders that were sent out that day. And she's definitely a woman of my taste. And so there's a lot of Anita Bruckner, a lot of women of the last century, women writers, a lot of the mid-century writers, just really fantastic taste, as I think, in what she's selling in the store. So highly curated. I have to admit that it really makes me want to open a bookshop in a different village in Tuscany. It sounds both challenging, frustrating, but also really, really lovely. Yeah, I like this a lot. And I also have learned a ton of Italian writers and different books based on what was being sold that day. So my TBR has kind of exploded a little bit. This is definitely one I think I'm going to look for in a paper copy, because just for that reading list that I can compile from there. So yeah, I was really impressed. I thought it was just going to be light and fun, but it was much, much better than I expected. Oh, and before I go, there's also this fantastically interesting story about Magda Szabo, because she had previously worked with Magda Szabo, and so she reflected on something that happened that was making her reflect on a specific incident that happened with her that was just If you are like me and love Magda Szabo, that was a really, really interesting portion of the book. Okay, next up, I have not been able to get my hands on a physical copy of this book. I made mention in my last video that I had done was doing the audiobook of it. So the book is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Now, I haven't gotten on with any Barbara Kingsolver since the Poisonwood Bible. That one I absolutely loved and revered. I think so much of it was because of my childhood in Mozambique. Although we didn't have a missionary background, there were just a lot of the young girls' experiences of culture dynamics and then how they grew up out of that I related to very, very much. And so when I saw this on the Women's Prize shortlist, and I always read the Women's Prize shortlist as part of my reading groups, I thought, it's going to be a huge book. It's going to be an expensive book. And I just thought, do I want to own it knowing my precarious history? And I thought, no, let me not do that. But I did start looking for an audiobook version of it. I looked through the libraries. I couldn't get a hold. The list was incredible for it, but I did find it on Scribd. So I downloaded it quickly and started listening to it on Scribd. As I was listening to it, I started talking to Leo, as we always do, from Leo's Little Book Life on Instagram. And we decided to quickly jump into a buddy read because he actually bought a copy of it. So he had it in his hand. So I'm doing the audiobook, he's doing the written word. And David Copperfield is his favorite book. So he was either going to love it or he was going to hate it. I didn't think there was going to be too much in the middle for him. And so I started the book and I'm listening to it. The narration was done by Charles Thurston, and I think he did a fantastic job. The accents were spot on. But I was getting irritated. It had just won the Women's Prize. And I kind of felt like, is that fair? I'm stepping into controversial waters here. But, when I think of Boulder, when I think of Stillborn, I think of those books as really offering unique voices, important voices to the modern day sensibility about motherhood. In both cases, I think that's profound contribution to pushing literature forward for women. This is a book, although very, very well written, is built off the skeleton of a classic. David Copperfield is a classic, and it's a classic for a reason. The tale of injustice and poverty, child abuse, cruelty, told through the eyes of this young, innocent boy as he grows up with a good heart and wide-eye naivete at kind of all of the bad things that exist out in the world, is a powerful book. I get why Barbara Kingsolver wanted to redo this, because when you set this construct, from the Victorian age in Appalachia of the 1990s, in the opioid crisis, in the beginnings of the opioid crisis, you see so many parallels. You see so many things that are the same. So I completely understand. And I also think it's a good book. I do. I think it's a good book. But should it have gotten the prize? Was the prize awarded because the importance of the story that we haven't really evolved since Victorian age? In that sense, I would have liked to see something a little fresher, more innovative, new to the conversation. That doesn't take away from the importance of the book and the value that the book brings and how well it's written. It's written incredibly well. But it's much harder to bring a brand new voice into the world and bring a whole new conversation than it is to just reframe a previous well-known conversation and book. Okay, so let me get into what I liked and what I didn't like. So immediately when I was talking with Leo, I have to admit I was irate. I was really mad. And I think it's because the thing that I loved so much about David Copperfield was his purity of heart. He's a good child. He's a good kid. And these things befall him, right? And so he's this innocent in this world that is set up not for his success. And one of the joys of reading it, one of the things that keeps you from just falling into this pit of despair at how hard his life is, it are the ways that he just doesn't realize how bad it is. He doesn't realize what's happening. And we, as the reader, are able to look at what's happening and we can see in ways that he can't. And so it allows us to kind of see his youthful naivete in a way that is endearing and sweet and loving, all the while he's kind of bumbling through life, right? So I love that. I absolutely love that in the book. And I didn't, this demon Copperhead, whose name is Damon, but everyone calls him Demon, is born in a trailer park in Appalachia. And all of the points of the book, all of the major points are there. The characters are reimagined and put into this context. But he's exposed to too much too early. So that youthful naivete, I didn't see it. Leo argued, but he's a good kid. And I do agree. I think he has a good heart, and he does try to do the right thing. But it's one of the things I loved the most about David Copperfield, and to have everything else be there and not have that kind of beating heart at the center, just made me angry. It made me angry. So yeah, I pushed through my frustration and bitterness at that, and then tried to just listen to it for what it was, which is a story about a boy in Appalachia. But it's very hard when you read something like this to not, there's always a shadow in the writing. There's always an illusion. And if you care about the book, if you've read the book, you're always going to be comparing and having these almost fan moments of, oh, that's who that is. Oh, okay, I know where we're going. I know what's going to happen. I think she did a pretty good job at that. Again, if we take out, let's remove the prize winning portion of it. I think she did a good job. And so you're reading this book and you're reminded, purposefully reminded of the fact that same things were happening in the Victorian age. So politically, as a political book with a message, I thought that was incredibly effective. I think one thing that I kept thinking was that I think she was conflating a little bit the voice of David Copperfield and the voice of Charles Dickens. So in some cases, especially near the end, it felt like Demon was doing this kind of Dickens voiceover as opposed to David himself, the child who's grown into these circumstances and situations. So yeah, good book, absolutely. I think it was a solid read. Should it have won the prize? I don't think so. But I'm open to hearing your thoughts. So please let me know your thoughts below about should it have won the prize. All right, so that's enough for my controversy or potentially controversial statements there. Let me switch over to a book that I just finished. and oh my God, I loved this book. This might be one of the best biographies I think I've ever read on a literary figure ever. This is Shirley Hazzard, A Writing Life by Brigitta Olubas. And this wraps up my 5-month-long glorious reading project on Shirley Hazzard. We did an author spotlight series I think we started in January. And I've enjoyed every single Sunday that we've checked in on the progress with her fiction, with her short stories, and then some of us continued on to read this together. This is a monumental work. I was just in the cafe reading, and I thought I had more to read. I thought I was going to finish it at home, but I misjudged how much was left. And I was in the final chapter when I'm in this cafe. And I got so emotionally invested in her life that, obviously it's a biography. The woman has passed away. I know that. But reading the decline of her health, the decline of her mind, and the end of her life, knowing also that it means the end of this 5 months that I've had, more than 5 months, 5 months with these wonderful people every single Sunday. I got choked up. I literally was like trying to hold back tears in this public cafe. Because what she was able to accomplish in her life, being a self-taught woman of culture, sophistication, of letters. And she really lived a life of letters, of global exploration. She was not a nationalist. She felt at home in the world, and really cared about writing stories and telling stories and holding people accountable to moral truths. It was remarkable. It was, it was so well researched. And I loved how this book allowed us to revisit in a different lens the works that we have just explored. I think I found out that this is her first biography she's ever done, and I'm blown away because it was outstanding. I don't feel that she overly fawned over Shirley Hazzard. I don't feel that she was uncritical of her, especially some of her foibles, maybe some of her more annoying qualities. But I think you can tell that she really understands the material. And now I will say that I think this book is better from having read at least a few of Shirley Hazzard's books and or short stories, because so much of it is about the writing, not the process, but the writing itself and her life. But I've learned so much about literary circles of this time period, because she was very much part of the literary community in both New York City, Paris, and then also the woman just loved Italy and really found a home there. Now, my first book that I read of hers was Bay of Noon, set in Naples, and you can tell that she really felt an affinity for this place, and to have it all explained and talked about, and her love of Capri was just a delight. This is one of those that my heart was pumping, and I just thought, what a life lived. What a truly, truly remarkable woman, remarkable output. And I'm both happy and sad. I'm happy to have done this and to have deeply explored her writing, and so sad to say goodbye to her. Okay, so that's what I've read. I'm still, I've said this multiple weeks, but now I'm serious. Like I'm getting down to the wire. I've got to read this book. This is Soul of the Age: The Life, Mind, and World of William Shakespeare by Jonathan Bate. I am making progress. It's just not as fast, and I've got to focus. Shakespeare's challenging, and Shakespeare historians are challenging to read as well. And because I was more focused on the Shirley Hazzard, I did not get as much done here, but this is Daughters of Night by Laura Sheperd Robinson, but I'm still enjoying it very much. So that's it for me for now. I would love to know your thoughts specifically on Demon Copperhead and The Win. All right. I hope you had a great reading week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.